International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
My very special guest is Dr. Brenda Wade. She's a clinical psychologist based in San Francisco, specializing in couples and family therapy. She has appeared as a guest expert on such popular national daytime talk programs as Oprah, The Today Show, Good Morning America, Maury, and Jenny Jones. She appeared with Peter Jennings in the ABC News special, Children First. Dr. Wade is a regular contributor to Essence Magazine, and in addition, she has contributed to such publications as Ebony Magazine, Ladies' Home Journal, Jet Magazine, Heart and Soul, Bridal Fantasy of Canada, and Match.com. Dr. Wade is the host on television's CW's Black Renaissance, the longest-running topical news show focused on issues important to the African American community in the San Francisco Bay Area. She also contributes expert commentary to CNN, HLN, and local news affiliates.
I am the co-host of the national PBS show, Healing Quest, and I'm very, very honored and proud to be part of Healing Quest. It's a show that is so close to my heart because it's about the journey that we're all on. I really believe we're all on a journey of healing, of transformation, of becoming more and more of our true selves. One friend of mine says, remembering who we are.
I want to begin by thanking you for your time and your energy, Dr. Brenda Wade.
Oh, it's an honor to be with you, Mr. Johnnie Burrell.
Thank you very much. Your book, 99 Things You Wish You Knew Before Falling in Love. Yes. I'm going to get to that, but for starters, there's another passion you have, and that's the divorce rate.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I have a mission. And my mission is to cut the divorce rate in half by the year 2015 and to raise the level of healthy marriages and relationships by 50%.
Talk to us about that, Dr. Wade. The divorce rate, what happened?
You know, the divorce rate, I would say for the last 40 to 45 years has been right around 50%. Sometimes it gets up over 51, sometimes it drops a little bit below 50, but I'd say 50% good number. And what that means is that half of the people who get into committed long-term relationships, what we call marriage, end up not being able to hold their lives and their families together. Now, this is devastating for everyone. It's devastating for the children. It's the number one health incident. In the United States alone, it costs $385 billion a year. Now, most of that
and this crosses cultural lines.
Crosses cultural lines.
Cultural,
now, I'm going to come to the ethnic cultural piece in a minute. Okay. But I just want to talk about the problem in general terms first because it's so huge. And most people don't stop and say, well, what does it cost us if we have that kind of instability in our lives? And the health incidents, you know, we have this life stress unit scale, which is a predictor of illness or accident. The number 2 highest rated, in other words, you get the most points and it's not good, thing that can happen is you go through a divorce. The only thing worse is death of spouse. So with this very high predictor of illness and accident, people get sick as a result of the stress from divorce. And I'll tell you, at least when somebody dies, people go, gee, I'm really sorry. They bring over the casseroles, you get some cards, folks kind of look out for you for a little while. But in a divorce, everyone goes, ooh, that might be contagious. I know because I've been through it. Right. And people don't know how to act because no one wants to see their life fall apart. So when we talk about ethnic, what I really need to say is that if you are a person who is black or brown, that divorce rate is about 69%. And 69% means the level of instability in the community is huge, and that leads to less educational success, more illness, because most illness, remember, is stress related,
yes.
and it has to do with the high incidence of infant mortality that we see especially in the African American community because of the stress, and it also has to do with the economic depression that we see over and over and
Sure,
over in black
sure.
and brown communities.
Absolutely.
Because what we know is, and I'll never forget this was right after our What Mama Couldn't Tell Us About Love book came out. Brenda Lane Richardson and I wrote this book together, and we were in Washington, D.C. at one of the largest African American bookstores in the country. And we had done a reading, and there was a nice crowd of people, a couple hundred people as I remember it. And an elderly man stood up in the back. He said, "I came down here today because I heard that you ladies had a book about black relationships." He said, "I am the founder of the Black Financial Planners of America." Now, I didn't know there was a group called the Black Financial Planners of America. Where were they when I needed them? Seriously, where were they? And the key, he said, to economic improvement in the black community was if black people would get married and stay married. Now, once he said it, it was an obvious sort of thing, but it honestly had never occurred to me. It just hadn't occurred to me that if we stabilize our families, of course
it all comes
we're
together.
going to do better
Yeah.
economically.
And it has to be the reason that you wrote the book, 99 Things You Wish You Knew Before Falling in Love. I want to ask, where did that desire to work in the field of compassion come from? Your mother was a teacher.
Yes.
How influential was she in your picking this field of helping and others? And at that conference you went to, there was kind of a light bulb moment with regard to what the guy said about black families. And
Yes.
in writing your book, I'm sure you incorporated a lot of those thoughts into saying, hey, I need to put something together that's going to help people
Right.
to come together and stay together.
I have to say that there have been a lot of light bulb moments. I've been very fortunate to have good mentors and teachers and tutors and therapists. And
your mother was one of them.
well, I'm going to come to that in a second, because I wouldn't necessarily say that. In another kind of way she was.
I see.
My mom, like a lot of African Americans who grew up in the South under Jim Crow, was very traumatized. She was very traumatized. And I think one of the things that happens when people are traumatized, and this is what led to us writing What Mama Couldn't Tell Us About Love, our second book, which was I wanted to figure out why the divorce rate was so high, why incidences of violence in the black community were high. I wanted to figure out why and how it was that no matter what seemed to be said, people were doing something different about making those breakthroughs. So I started looking at the historical roots of trauma, looking at intergenerational patterns. So here's the story. My grandfather, my mother's father, was born in 1898. And when he married my mother's mother, he was 30 years old and she was 15 years old.
Sounds familiar.
Right?
Very familiar.
And what I looked
Yes.
at 1898 and I went, 1898? That means his parents had been raised by people who were slaves, or his parents had been slaves.
Right. Absolutely.
One of the two, depending where he was, because there were 13 kids. He could very well have been one of the youngest, I'm not sure, of the birth order. His parents could have been slaves. Yeah. Now, that is a severe trauma. And one of the confirmations of that I got is that we tried to get What Mama Couldn't Tell Us About Love, Healing the Emotional Legacy of Racism, Celebrating Our Light, that's the full title of the book, published by a black publisher. And we could not get an African American publisher to take the book. All the black editors said, what do you mean? Racism and slavery have nothing to do with who I am. And the woman who bought the book called me from HarperCollins in New York. She said, hi, my name is Gail Winston. And Dr. Wade, I want you to know why I bought your book. I said, I'd love to know. She said, I'm Jewish.
I understand.
My family survived the Holocaust, and I recognize every
Sure.
single thing in the book, because my family, Holocaust survivors, have all the same symptoms.
Sure.
Again, bing, the light came on. Slavery, Jim Crow, racism, this is a Holocaust. And everyone who is outside of that privileged white male, straight person, WASP profile has suffered their own Holocaust.
Sure.
Because it's traumatizing to not fit that middle of the road profile. You're going to be exposed to some kind of ism or phobia of some kind. And it is very, very painful. Very painful.
So starting from where we are, you said get over the soulmate myth. You're on the road to saying to yourself, I'm going to write a book that is going to help people
Yeah.
have relationships. We're going to talk about maintenance. We're going to talk about a lot of things regarding relationships. But for
Right.
starters, the soulmate myth. Talk about that.
You know,
We hear that all of the time.
With healing myself, because my mother was traumatized, my father was traumatized, they acted out their trauma on us kids. I got married with this idea, I'm a psychologist, I've studied everything, I've had classes, I've read books, I've had therapy, I'm ready to go, I'm good to go, right? Well, what I didn't account for was I was thinking, I found my soulmate, that's enough. What I didn't realize is that the intergenerational patterns were there. Two traumatized people got married. And both of us
Not
acted out our
soulmates.
trauma.
Right.
The soulmate thing makes you think there's some fantasy, I'm going to meet this person, it'll all be lovely. Well, you know what? The truth is we have to each become a whole person. And it's an ongoing process. We're always awakening. We're always becoming more whole. So I say, forget about looking for a soulmate. Instead, look for a way to understand your own intergenerational patterns. Keep growing. Now, don't say, when I get well, I'll find somebody and I'll make that lifetime commitment. And I don't care if you're black, white, gay, straight, whoever it is. I want everybody to find that person you love, make that commitment, and build a stable relationship, build a stable home and family, because you know what? That benefits you, but it benefits all of us, because the more stable every community is, the greater the contribution of that community to the whole. And we don't have to pay, you know, tax dollars to take care of you if your family comes apart, and we don't have to take care of your kids when they act out their trauma and get in trouble. So there's my piece about
And not just to the community, but to the country, to the world for that matter.
That's right.
In terms of physical love, you should think with your heart, not your hormones.
Not
You got to
with
get it out, not
all
with
right.
hormones.
So-
And again, we're on the road to
Yes.
building, cultivating a relationship, choosing love.
Well, a lot
That
of
is
people
a step.
think
Tell us
just
about that.
because, a lot of people think, just because you turn me on and I have a sense of sexual passion and lust, that's love. Now, you know it's not love. You may convince yourself that sexual passion is love, but love takes a kind of maturity. Love does not carry us, even when you fall in love. It doesn't carry us. We need skills. Now, if you ask me what the #1 cause of divorce is, and people are running around saying things like, oh, gay marriage is undermining the family. Come on. The #1 cause of people's relationships not working out is because we're not prepared. The research is in. 50% fewer divorces happen if you get premarital coaching. That means if you learn better, you do better. None of us took classes on how to be a good mate because they didn't exist. That's why I created the Love, Money, Seva Seminars. This is my answer to the problem of holding our families and our communities together for our mutual benefit. Take a class, get coaching, learn what it means. If you don't know what the 4 C's are and the 4 A's, you don't have a prayer
Tell us about
in
the
your
4
relationship.
C's.
Okay, the 4 C's, determine. Absolutely, research has determined those will ruin your relationship. And I'm basing a lot of this on John Gottman's research from the University of Washington Love Lab. The four C's are criticism, coldness, contempt, that is rolling your eyes or sucking your teeth or being disgusted
and
or being
criticism.
Sarcastic, criticism, coldness, contempt, or combativeness. Now let's talk about combativeness for a minute. See, combativeness is, I attack you. You never come home on time, Johnny, and that's why I'm angry and I'm justified to go off. Now try to get close to me. Come on over. Come. Keep coming. Now that's as close as you're ever going to get, because I am blaming you. I'm attacking you. Now most people, when they're blamed, what do you feel like doing if I'm blaming you?
You retreat.
So you feel like withdrawing. Some people will blame back. Oh yeah? Well, let me tell you what I think about
and
you.
And therefore the combativeness.
The combativeness can be defending or can be
Sure.
attacking. Either way, escalation leads to a relationship falling apart. And that's the danger. So if you have C's going on in your relationship, check yourself. It takes a lot of emotional maturity. It takes a lot of self-control. It takes a lot of understanding your intergenerational patterns, because if you come from an angry, traumatized family where there's a lot of anger and acting out, or in the case of my family and a lot of the people I know, with all that anger and acting out, beating the kids, this sort of thing, that teaches the child that that's how you handle feelings. And the only feeling that's really acceptable here is anger. And believe me, that is the quick recipe for destroying a relationship. Now the A's, write this down. This is money in the bank. If you practice instead, and in my very first book, Love Lessons, I put in these things I call love savers. Little did I know that later science would prove that those really are the things that save your love. Number one, practice appreciation. And I say in the Love Lessons book, be grateful for your mate. Remember when you didn't have one? You were out looking for somebody. You were hoping to find somebody. And then you find somebody who loves you. You love them. And you go, it's just you. The old ball and chain. And you forget to look at that person with eyes of appreciation. That's number one. Number two, admire your mate. What are the things about them that you admire? The way they are in the world. Their kindness, their generosity, the way that they're dependable, the way that they are striving to grow, their commitment, whatever it is. There are many, many things to admire. Look for them. And then the last two A's are acceptance. Accept that person for who they are and allow them to be themselves. And even though you accept them, encourage them to keep growing. Encourage them to keep unfolding. That makes a relationship healthier. And the final A is affection. Duh, right? With your words, with your tone of voice, with your touch, even just with your gaze. Practice sending that feeling of love. Now, what we know, now here's key. I really want you to write this down. It takes 4 A's to every 1 C. That's the ratio, 4 to 1. To have a healthy relationship, because just 1 C is so destructive.
And that blame is huge.
It's the worst.
Huge.
Couples getting caught in that blame cycle.
Toxic.
Oh, it's you, no, it's you, no, it's you, no, it's you.
So you find both backing off and not ever really coming together.
Or both just attacking and attacking and attacking.
Right, and you have that combat.
The cycle of escalation.
How do we begin to recognize in relationships, sometimes there are setbacks and there's but they're not failures.
That's
right.
To
recognize that a setback is temporary, you can get over it, versus
if you
a failure.
work on it.
However, we need to learn these
That's
things.
Right.
How do we work on them?
You know,
where do we go to learn?
Every couple goes through breakdowns, but every breakdown can be a breakthrough if you're committed to learning and growing. Because couples who grow together, who come back from the brink, who come back from a breakdown, have stronger relationships. So there's Alan Levitt over at UC Berkeley who found that every relationship goes through downs and ups. And if you hang in there through the down period, and here's the key question, I have to ask you to write this down again. The key question is, how can we grow from this breakdown? What can we learn from this breakdown?
Sure. Well, one of the things you say, a way to begin to learn is to visualize, and you alluded to the Olympics. The Olympics have just concluded, I think about a week ago.
Right.
But one of the things, I had experience of winning a gold medal on the United States karate team.
Good for you.
So I bring this up because that really struck me about visualizing. And in the martial arts, I've been in martial arts all of my life.
Right.
You have to, the white belt says, I am going to do, the brown belt says, I am doing, and the black belt says it's done.
Right.
So we had to, in our minds, see the goal, imagine that we would get there.
The mental training.
The mental training. And so in a relationship, on that road to cultivating or even beginning to choose love, you said begin to visualize. If you don't have all those other things at hand with regard to knowing,
visualization is key
happening.
Because it trains the brain, and you as an athlete know
Yes.
that every one of those Olympic athletes went to Park Avenue to that Olympic Mental Training Institute. I'm sure they did. And what we know is that as you visualize yourself doing something, the brain rehearses it. The brain actually fires every muscle
and acknowledges
as if you're doing
your thoughts.
One of the first things I teach people in my classes and in my books is how to put together your genogram. And those are the emotional patterns you learned before you were 7. Now the bad news is probably a 7-year-old has been running your relationships. The good news is you can reprogram your brain, because whose brain is this? Now everybody, I want you to just say, my brain. And I want you to say, I am the master of my mind, because you are. That's why I keep saying, keep learning, keep growing, keep reading, keep taking classes, because when you learn better,
you do better. When you're on the road to choosing love, you talked about abstinence, and you said it can be a huge sabotager.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
You know,
too much focus on
sex, like not having sex. Yeah, look, it's just focus on sex. And people think, well, I don't want to focus on sex, so I'll be abstinent. Well, when you're abstinent, if you go 180 degrees from anything, you're still in the middle of it. It's still the thing that's pushing you. And I've worked with so many people who said, you know, my church tells me to be abstinent, or I've messed up so many relationships, I just decided to be abstinent, not have sex. That doesn't fix those habit patterns in your brain. It's not having sex that's causing the problems in your relationship, and it's not having sex won't fix those. You've got to do some work on yourself. I wish abstinence would fix it. I'd say go be abstinent, but it doesn't. Look at all those kids who, this was a huge, huge problem for all those young Christian kids who were abstinent and then had early marriages so they could have permission to be sexual. And the divorce rate was 85%. And the church went, oh my God, we have to figure this out. We've got to do something. And the answer is, do I have to say it again? Learn better.
Do better.
Do better. And abstinence is not an answer. It's not an answer. Unless you're working on those old patterns, unless you have an authentic way to communicate your needs, unless you have the skills to actually love, and unless you have insight into who you are, what you learned as a child, because that's what you're bringing to the party, and unless you can visualize the victory and you have effective actions. Now, I just spelled ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E, authentic, love, insight, victory, effective action, ALIVE. That's what I teach in my classes. I want to give that to you. Take that and use it.
In a relationship, what can a person do to show the other person that they can be trusted? You know, in relationships, there are trust issues.
The most important thing is to know if you've got trust issues, you brought them to the party. It's not the other person. Trust issues are what is downloaded in that little kid's brain before the age of 7. And most people who have trust issues get in the relationship and go, well, it must be you. It's your fault if I don't trust you. No. Trust is something you give yourself permission to have. It is not up to the other person. If you trust the other person and they betray your trust, okay, now we have a different issue. But what I know from my years of working with couples, and literally I've worked with thousands of couples when I hosted the national television show, Can This Marriage Be Saved? We were working with different couples every single day. I went on tour with African American women on tour, traveled the country, working with thousands and thousands and thousands of women, African American women in this case, about relationships. And what I know is that trust is something that's broken when we're little and we carry it with us. And I asked thousands of women, what did your mother teach you about men when we were on tour? And I've got a lot of those in the What Mama Couldn't Tell Us About Love book, but I'll tell you one. The number one thing is don't ever trust a man. Mm-hmm. Don't ever count on a man. Always have your own money. And one of the worst ones we heard, we actually had to put it in the book, was the only difference between a man and a dog is the dog's tail is longer. That's horrible.
Well, one of the
you
things...
come into a relationship with those ideas. Yeah. Do you think your partner's not going to feel it? Do you think you won't project it by constantly being on your guard, by constantly looking for and setting your partner up to fail? Mm-hmm. Of course you will.
Well, I know a lot of men are sensitive about relationships in terms of money and feeling that they're only good for one thing, and that is to have a job and to pay the bills. But
that's the flip side. Yeah. See, men are taught that.
Sure,
she only wants you for your money, and women are taught don't trust. Mm-hmm. And I hear it over and over. Now, men and women actually want different things in relationship. I remember working with one couple who came to one of our Love Money Seva seminars. I do an intensive 3-day seminar. And when they came in, he was sitting over there like this, and she was over on the other side like this. They couldn't have been further apart, even though they were sitting next to each other. And I looked at them and I said, wow, neither of these two people trusts each other. So one of the first things we do in the workshop is everybody looks at their genogram. And then those who come in a couple or those with single, whatever, everybody looks at the genogram and says, what are the key relationship patterns that we see? And then we draw a line connecting those patterns all the way down to the person who's in the class. And guess what? Both of them came from families where as far back as they could go, there were broken relationships where people had come apart. Her great-grandfather had abandoned
Sure.
the great-grandmother, mm-hmm. Then the grandfather had abandoned, and then her father had abandoned, and her whole MO, her whole belief, because it had been passed down, was he's going to abandon me. Mm-hmm. So what had she done? When he goes, I won't care because I'm keeping him at a distance. Mm-hmm. And she was using anger to push him away. Now what was he doing? Flip side. He was all shut down and depressed as a way of pushing her away. And they were on the brink of divorce. And in the class, when people talk about what they want to get out of it, he said, well, I always knew, listen to this, I always knew you were going to leave me, he said to her. So I wouldn't be surprised because you're threatening divorce. Now the key is each of them in the class was able to see the pattern and understand it was a learned pattern. And if you can learn an old pattern, ding, 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 that's right, you can learn a new pattern, because this is a brilliant supercomputer. Tap your head and go, brilliant supercomputer right here. Always, always, as long as there is breath in our bodies, this keeps learning and developing. And if you stop learning and growing, you know what happens. The brain just shuts down.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
That's it. Don't use it, you lose it. Thank you.
Well, it certainly seems like there has to be a lot more education in terms of people learning how, we learn math, we learn how to drive a car, we learn skills, we learn all of these things.
And wait, speaking about learning to drive a car, just like you have to get a driver's license, I say you need a love license where you have to know something before you will be issued a license to get in a relationship. You know, I have this fantasy of a commercial for that where there's a really gorgeous looking, attractive person sitting there.
Like you.
Somebody, oh, bless you. Somebody walks up and says, "Hi, would you like to go out?" And you go, "May I see your love license, please?" Like that, you know?
What are some of the things that tell what are some of the signs that tell a couple that they're heading in the right direction?
Good question. The best sign that you're heading in the right direction is
the same direction.
Well,
not necessarily the right direction, but the same
direction is to grow together. When people come in to see me, 9 times out of 10, do you know what they tell me?
We grew apart.
We grew apart.
Yes.
We grew apart. Yeah. And I always say, do you know it's even easier to grow together? Mm-hmm. All you need to do is once a year, sign up, take a workshop or a seminar together. All you have to do is every night, keep a book by your bedside, and every night, just for 5 minutes, one of you reads something to the other one that's uplifting and helps you to keep growing. And here's the third and final thing. Keep that alive model. Are you communicating authentically?
Absolutely.
Keep growing the love skills. Keep growing the insight.
Yes.
Keep visualizing the victory. See yourselves at age 99 walking down the street holding hands, and be clear that you have to use effective action if you want good results. Now, I came up with a concept. It's in the 99 Things book. I call it the PQ. Actually, that's in my Power Choices book. That's your power quotient. And that's how much you're growing physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So keep growing. That's the answer. Grow together. You don't have to grow apart. Do you know, this is really important. Do you know that even if your relationship hits a snag, if you will go and get effective coaching and do some more growing, 50% more relationships could be saved. Did you know that? So there's really no excuse. Do you know what I figured out? When I looked at the numbers, the scientist in me, I just love to look at the statistics. There should only be 8.5% of relationships failing.
And we have 50%.
We have 50 or more, 50 to 51%. It should only be 8.5%. Because we don't go and do what we need to do to learn.
Right. Well, communicate. I had an experience, it wasn't funny at the time, but I remember exactly where we were, I think Parker Street in California, about to make a left turn. And I said, how's my wife, how are things going? How's the relationship? And she said, in the toilet. And I was shocked. I thought everything was cool. You know? But since that time, there were some things that was going on that we weren't talking about. But that was a while ago. And since that time, we have our little thing, you know, how's the relationship? You know, we test the waters. We talk about it. And sometimes there are things that she might say, you know, we need to talk about this. So I'll say, you know, I need to talk to you about something. So always have that barometer and talk.
And know how to talk. See, a lot of times people say, well, I'm just telling you the truth. And then they say something that is so mean, so hurtful, that they're right over here using the 4 C's, but then they say, well, I told you. No, it has to be skillful communication, because unskillful communication is the death knell for a relationship, because everything is energy. Everything is energy. And if you use negative energy, boom, your life becomes negative. Your relationship becomes negative. Use positive energy, that's what the 4 A's are, and everything starts to bloom.
The 4 A's again. What
the
are they?
4 A's are
quick.
affection.
Affection.
Good. Admiration.
Admiration.
Appreciation.
Appreciation.
And acceptance.
Acceptance.
Accept one another. You can keep growing, but accept one another as people.
What about the things that go into relationships? For example, girls' night out, boys' night out. Sometimes, do you talk about those things before a relationship? My wife and I, we had that conversation before we got married. She said, well, what kind of a guy are you? At 10 o'clock, do you decide you want to go to the club? Well, I'm pretty much a loner. So it all worked out. But what about those kinds of things? You know, boys' night out.
Everything should be on the... I do premarital coaching all the time. all the time in our classes and seminars, on our teleseminars. We have a mastermind series, and in those calls, I am coaching people. And the first thing I say is the best relationships are the ones where you ask the tough questions up front, if you remember to ask. A lot of times people don't think to ask.
Yes.
And if you're single, you know the most important question is you have to ask, are you available? Because a lot of single people say, well, I had no idea. Well, you didn't ask. If you ask, you'll get an answer, most likely.
And what about if you're in a relationship, what are the signs that tell you you should either continue, ride it out, or leave?
You don't ever ride it out or just continue. I am going to say this, and I'm going to have both feet like this. A relationship is like a garden. You have to keep tending it. You pull out the weeds. You put in the fertilizer. My mentor, Dr. Virginia Satir, used to say it takes bleep, bleep to grow roses. And you know what that bleep is. Starts with an S. It takes that to grow roses. So, yeah, there's going to be stuff that comes up. But keep working on it. Keep working on it. If you want a great garden, be a good gardener and keep learning. And, you know, it's funny because most of us spend more time working on our cars or our houses
than we do our relationships.
Or, let me toss this in, or our parenting, because that comes from the habit brain too.
You know, you talk about in a relationship, there are things that you should always do. Change up your routine. Tell your mate that you love them is important.
Yes.
Touching is important.
Yes.
Make dates.
Yes.
This is all maintenance. Be grateful. All of those things should be ongoing.
Right, well, let's talk about the dates. Let's talk about the dates, because the dates is really important. I say when you date your mate, then your relationship maintains some of that romantic sizzle, because you do some of the things you did when you were courting, when you stopped in.
And single even.
Oh yeah. Now here's the key with the dates. Take turns planning the date. This week I plan, next week you plan, so somebody is going to be surprised every other week. Even if it's something as simple as, because I used to do this, I used to cook dinner, put it in the car, and we would drive off and have a picnic in the car while the sun set, because we're lucky enough to be here in the gorgeous Bay Area with beautiful sunsets. It could be really simple. Or you could rent a motel room for the night. That could be the date, but you take candles with you or roses or something. But plan dates. Let your imagination. I have a friend who married a man because he planned a date where he cooked dinner at home. She came over, and after serving the nice dinner and there were flowers for her, he said, would you like me to read you poems or would you like to watch the movie? And when he read the poems, she went, keeper. And to this day, they're very happy because she'll say, read me a poem.
Seva Seminars, 99 things you should know before you fall in love. That has been our focus. You have the last word, Dr. Brenda Wade.
Well, we call our seminars Love, Money, and Seva because the number one cause of conflict in relationships is conflict over money, and Seva, S-E-V-A, is the word for selfless service. Because if you really want a fulfilling life, a fulfilling relationship, you have to ask, not what about me, what about me, what about me, gimme, gimme, gimme. It has to be, how can I show up? How can I contribute? How can I make a difference, whether it's in your mate's life or make a difference in your community? It's about not what we take, but what we give. That leads to a healthy relationship and fulfillment, and because I am passionate about all of us learning how to love successfully over time and having that victory in love. And I come to this as a divorced person. It is so painful. I wouldn't wish a divorce on anybody. I know there's a better way. I've made it my business to find a better way. And I want to pass on what I've learned to you. I have a 90-minute teleseminar on my website as your gift from me. Please go there, see what it might be like for you to learn some of these secrets that I've learned over time. I want you to have them. Even if it's not for you, just think somebody's going to come to you for a little bit of advice about their relationship. Instead of you saying, get rid of that person, say, you know what? I've learned about the 4 E's. I've learned to stay away from the 4 C's. I've learned the secret behind having deep insight. I've learned how to keep my GQ high, my growth quotient. So there's so much to learn. Please accept this gift. Sign up right now. Don't go away. Go right now to docwade.com and accept the gift. I'm sending you love and blessings. I'm Dr. Brenda Wade, and thank you so much, Mr. Johnnie Burrell.
You're welcome. My pleasure.